Hello, my dear friends. For this topic, we shall deliberate on the corruption that is in the world and as a precursor of one of the signs of Christ's coming. And we shall go to Matthew chapter 24, reading from verse um, 37. It says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days of that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." And of course, verse 42 tells us, "Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come." Verse 42, Matthew 24:42. "Watch ye therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. Be ready at all times." Right? Then he says now, therefore, verse 44 also says, "Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh." And that can mean different things according to where you look at it. Because when the Son of Man come, when your life is ended, because that's the way you'll remain until judgment, right? Or if you are so lucky to be alive when Jesus come without tasting of the physical death, right? So whichever way it goes, you ought to be ready, because more than anything else, death is certain. But to not to further delay to the meat of the message tonight, I shall go to the book Testimonies on Sexual Behavior by N.G. White, page 12. No, page 98. And it says, disregard of the seventh commandment. Disregard of the seventh commandment. The seventh commandment, I think, is Exodus chapter 20 and verse 17. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, God's law, the way of happiness. Previous, and this is following up to Matthew chapter 24 and the verse that I just read, where Jesus said, verse 37, I think it is, right? Where Jesus says, so as it were in the days of Noah. He said, previous to this destruction of the old world by flood, its inhabitants were reeking in corruption. You can't find more corruption. That's what's going on today. Political corruption, social corruption, sexual corruption, financial corruption, educational corruption, immoral corruption, drug trafficking corruption, every kind of corruption. The world is wallowing in corruption. You can't get nothing done unless it's through corruption. You want something to be done, you have to pay off somebody, right? And no justice for the poor and those who don't have money. But if you can have money, you can buy your way out. Listen to this. It says, sin and crime of every description prevail. Sin and crime of every description prevail. If you're even blind now, you can see. The state of the world now is fast approaching the point when God will say to it, as he did anciently, "My spirit shall not always strive with man." One of the grievous sins existing in the degenerate age of corruption is adultery. This shameful sin is practiced to an alarming extent. The Sabbath and the marriage institution were ordained of God in Eden to be preserved sacred and holy. Both of these institutions of divine appointment have been disregarded and set at naught by men and women whose hearts are fully set in them to do evil. Adultery, the topic here, adultery, a Christian sin. But if the transgressors of the seventh commandment were to be found only amongst those who do not profess to be Christ's followers, the evil would not be a tenth part as great as it now is. But the crime of adultery is largely committed by professed Christians. Both clergymen and laymen, whose names stand fair upon the church record, are alike guilty. So the writer here is saying, if it was only in the world and in the churches who say the commandment is done away with, it wouldn't be bad. But right in the Adventist church, who is a church knowing that God's judgment is already taking place, and we are disregarding, no fear of God, we practice our sin as and still think that because we keep the Sabbath, we can go around chagraining ourselves as holy and acceptable before God. Many who profess to be ministers of Christ are like the sons of Eli. Many who profess to be ministers of Christ are like the sons of Eli, who ministered in the sacred office and took advantage of their office to engage in crime and commit adultery. You can read it there in second, I think it's First Kings. Causing the people to transgress the law of God. A fearful account will such have to render when the cases of all shall pass in review before God, and they be judged according to the deeds done in the body. Adultery is one of the terrible sins of this age. This sin exists among professed Christians of every class. So true. Most of us as Christians, you can't tempt us with liquor. You can't tempt us with drugs. You can't tempt us with money. But when it comes to the lust of the flesh, we wobble at the knees faster than a duck. So friend, it's for every one of us to know ourselves and know where we stand, and believe that there's power in the blood to help us to overcome whatever carnal weakness we have. We are liars if we say there's power in the blood and yet we keep on practicing sin day out, day in, thieving a little piece here and there, and say it doesn't matter, God understands. You're fooling yourself. Christians are called to lay their bodies a living sacrifice upon the altar of God. Let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it in the lust thereof. Neither yield your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves unto God as those that are alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness unto God. Romans 6, 12 and 13. If the bodies professedly laid upon the altar of God should pass that scrutiny that was given the Jewish sacrifice, how few would stand the test as pronounced perfect before God, preserved unto holiness, free from the taints of sin or pollution. No lame sacrifice could God receive. No lame sacrifice could God receive. No injured or diseased sacrifice would God accept. The offering given to God was required to be sound in every respect, without blemish and value. The origin of impure acts. None can glorify God in their body as he requires, while they are living in transgression of the law of God. If the body violates the seventh commandment, it is through the dictation of the mind. If the mind is impure, the body will naturally engage in impure acts. Purity cannot exist in the soul of one who yields his body to impure acts. If the body is serving lust, the mind cannot maintain consecration to God. To preserve a sanctified mind, the body must be preserved in sanctification and honor. The mind will then serve the law of God and yield willingly obedience to all its claims. Then, with the apostles, such can yield their members as instruments of righteousness unto God. The Lord made man upright, but he has fallen and become degraded, because he refuses to yield obedience to the sacred claims which the law of God has upon him. All the passions of man, if properly controlled and rightly directed, will contribute to his physical and moral health and ensure to him a great amount of happiness. The adulterer, the fornicator, and the incontinent do not enjoy life. There can be no true enjoyment for the transgressor of God's law. The Lord knew this, therefore he restricts man. He directs, commands, and he positively forbids. The Lord well knew that the happiness of his children depend upon their submission to his authority and living in obedience to his holy, just, and good rule of government. May the Lord bless you. Amen.